the right sponsors will really work with us on product fit or brand positioning to find true alignment on the offering. Like as you even mentioned, it's a partnership, and I think that that's an incredibly important aspect that is oftentimes overlooked.
Hey everyone, put your bags down and relax, and welcome to the Room Key, where we make underwriting sound less like a hostage negotiation. Today I'm excited to introduce you to Sonia Egyhazy. She's a hotel development executive at Accor, and she has worked across the legal department, acquisitions, development, and asset management. She's led brand side growth efforts and has been recognized publicly for her depth in real estate feasibility development and finance. Sonia has also participated in industry investment forums and panels focused on market outlook and owner-brand collaboration. Sonia, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have you here, get a little bit of your perspective. I told you I like origin stories. So where did you grow up?
Sure. And thanks for having me. I appreciate you taking the time. I grew up in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. I had two amazing parents growing up. My father was a graduate school professor, and my mother was a very talented artist who also worked out of our home to take care of me and my brother. I would say early on, my parents instilled an emphasis with us on hard work, and together they really modeled what true partnership should look like in my mind. And they valued education, both inside and outside of school. So really learning through experience, and through that really encouraging us from young ages to go out and try new things to help us build confidence, meet new people, really pushing us to excel in whatever we set our minds to. So given I was a curious kid with a lot of interests, I played a lot of sports when I was younger. I became really interested in horseback riding, and I played piano.
Okay. Things I have no experience in whatsoever. I can play a few notes of the Fur-Elise. That's all that I've got on me. Did you work at all in high school? What was your first job?
I did. So during the summer, I would say between 15 and 16, that was when I first started taking on summer jobs officially. And funny enough, my first job was technically in hospitality. I worked for a Turkish bakery. So learned how to bake, also learned how to get up very early. And that way I could get my work done and then enjoy the afternoons by the pool with friends.
Okay. I'm not familiar. What kind of things would you say do they bake at a Turkish bakery?
We really would run the gamut. We made not only breads, pastries, but dips such as baba ganoush and other, and they really took it out to make it more Mediterranean and Middle Eastern foods. So it was a great foray into that side of the business. I guess I technically stayed in food and beverage because then I worked at a number of restaurants through high school and college during breaks. So it was a good way of getting into hospitality from more of the ops side very early on. At the time, having no idea that my career would come back full circle and I would be working from a very different perspective after college.
Yeah, I love the bottom up stories, especially in the hospitality industry. How many owners and general managers started as a bartender or a bellhop or cleaning rooms, and slowly but moved all the way up because there's so many different opportunities in hospitality. It's such a huge world.
I agree. And I think that's something that I still very much love about the industry is you can take it in a variety of different directions. I think if you're a hard worker and you're interested and, I look back at my days rolling silverware, spending hours doing it and really being able to see a path because there were so many other functions in the restaurants that I worked in. And I eventually moved up to be a hostess and then a server and then a bartender and then front of house manager. And again, all great stepping stones and a way to earn money to help pay for things, especially during my earlier on in my career and through college. But yeah, I certainly think that's a very exciting part of the business that keeps people motivated and makes it a wonderful place to start a career.
Yes, absolutely. And those people that do start at the bottom, I feel like they just have a better idea of what it takes to manage and to run a large hotel, large restaurant, because they understand from the bottom up.
No,
It's important.
completely. And it's funny, some things have actually stuck with me. Like I remember the restaurant that I worked at, whenever you got due to the price point of the meals, generally $20 would be like the highest tip I would earn. So to this day, when I see a $20 bill like on a table, I'm like, oh, that's a lot of money. And it's funny because it's like I still have that assimilation, and it's pretty neat. And I think that it helps keeps me grounded of really where I started.
Yeah, I love it. College. Your dad was high academics. What did you do for college?
Sure. Since I grew up in Virginia and I was Virginia based, my parents guided us, understandably to in-state schools. So I attended and graduated from the University of Virginia in Charlottesville for my bachelor degree.
Okay. And you went on. That's not all that you've done as far as college goes, right?
Yeah, I think that my upbringing and the emphasis on education. Then went to graduate school at Georgetown. I was a finalist at MIT's commercial real estate competition, the case. And now I'm actually taking courses at Cornell in executive leadership online. So just a desire to continue to grow as much as I can. Every day, certainly my career offers me opportunities to grow in different ways as well. It's a great way to supplement that in a more formal or academic setting.
Yes, absolutely. Where did you go after college? Stay in Virginia? Did you take off?
I moved back up to DC, and at the time it was very in vogue to go to law school, especially if you were a liberal arts major like myself and you weren't really clear on where you wanted to take things next. But I received some very sage advice from some good family friends of mine, and they said, just try being a paralegal for a little bit and really feel out what the legal aspect, what it really looks like to work in law. So just so happened that the first paralegal position I took was with a hotel company. And while I learned fairly quickly that, as much as I respect lawyers and what they do, it really wasn't for me. And I worked for a great attorney at the time named Jamie Kroll, who's still someone I consider a trusted advisor. And he was, I think, instrumental in really kind of helping me career path and figure out what I was interested in. At the time, we were really busy working on transactions and papering those transactions from a legal perspective. And he helped me tap into that curiosity of learning, why are we doing the deals we're doing? How does the strategy of the company carried out by the development team and their efforts, like how does that all come together and how is that determined from the executive team? So this idea of moving into development really combined a lot of facets that I was interested in. It combined the real estate side of the business. It combined the economics, different markets that we work with, and also really from more of a practical standpoint, the day-to-day. I mean, there's a lot of variability in how the development team works. You never really know when that next deal is going to come around, and your schedules change. There's a significant travel involved. And then ultimately you get to see the strategy implemented. So being able to really understand the tangible results of what we can accomplish, is a phenomenally rewarding part of our job. Fortunately, the company I worked for at the time was, and one of the top executives on the development team, C.A. Anderson, who is instrumental in helping me build my career. I consider him a true mentor. He facilitated my move over to the development team as an analyst, where he taught me, not only how to use an HP 12C calculator, and how to underwrite a variety of deals, but really how to translate strategy into tangible results. And together, our company transformed from a portfolio of 150 hotels to over 300, expanding into different countries. over the course of 4 years.
Awesome. That's incredible. What did you like most about going from the legal side to the development, the analysis? What did you like best about the idea of the real estate development itself?
Sure. It seemed that there was an opportunity with development to implement a tremendous amount of creativity and basically take a concept from very inception to actual fruition. And really, for me, I really enjoy problem solving. And there seemed to be a number of problems or issues or ways that you can implement or optimize throughout the entire development process. And from an analytical standpoint, it really opened things up, especially when we're talking about new development or projects that are more complex, that have more food and beverage outlets or spa or other revenue streams that can be part of it. It seemed almost like there was endless opportunities to find ways to create more value. And when you're in an acquisitions role, that's really your job, in my opinion, is to collaborate with the operations team and the brands and to figure out, what is the best way to optimize an asset, how to price that accordingly, and if it fits within the company's strategy, how to move forward on it.
Absolutely. I feel like if you're like me, you like to have all of the options in front of you, not like, hey, this is the task or this is the goal in mind, and we're just going to, I don't want to say blindly, but we're going to walk in that direction. But I want to look at the whole horizon. What are all of the options? I do that as a broker all the time. I feel like half the time I talk my clients into not selling because I'm looking at, well, if you did this, you could increase the value. And if you also did this and this, you're going to increase your cash flow. And at that point, you're not even going to want to sell. I feel like I do that all the time, not necessarily shooting myself in the foot, because I like to be very consultative and look at all the options, because not that other people can't see the options, but I love to work through the different options. Even if it's not going to go anywhere, are we going to learn something by working through the processes in order to determine what are the new best paths going forward?
Completely. You just remind me of a great quote I heard the other day, which was like, if experience is the goal, you always win, and
Yes.
and the more rabbit holes you go down, and within reason, right? You can
Yes.
certainly learn something more about, and then you can have more conviction in ultimately what you decide, because you're making a better informed decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything in your early career, whether it's the early part of the development or in the legal side, any lessons that you learned that were not necessarily easy lessons to learn, but one that you would not trade?
Yeah, it's so many. But I would really say don't be afraid, especially for, I guess, your more junior listeners. Don't be afraid to ask questions and to share ideas. This was something I was very hesitant to do. I found myself early on in my career in rooms full of people who were far more senior than me. And I made the assumption that I couldn't necessarily add value because I didn't have their experience. But if you're not invited, or if you are invited to a meeting, make the assumption that people will want to hear from you. Maybe not the whole time, but if something comes up, that's how you add value in a conversation. And I think good leaders and good mentors are the ones who are interested in the collaboration. One thing I ask my junior team members is, what's the benefit of having a good idea if you don't share it?
Right.
I try to foster a culture that's appreciative of new ideas, even if it might not be the direction that we ultimately want to move forward in. I want to hear from you. You're part of the team. And I advocate for taking full advantage of the opportunities to expand your network. As you know, our industry is highly relationship driven. So getting out there, learning from one another, fostering those relationships, and have fun. It's really a fun industry that's I'm really honored to be a part of.
Yeah. I love how much this industry is very much a relationships business. You can't do anything, at least well, and for too long or get too far without really having to deal with a good number of people. And it's in the name, right? Hospitality. You can't do hospitality by yourself. And even if
No.
you're just running the spreadsheets and looking up information, doing legal paperwork, you can be on your own, but it's still very much a relationship long term.
Exactly. And I like to remind myself that it's really a service industry. So when it comes to fostering relationships, in the spirit of how can I help? What are you working on? How can I help you? And I'm sure you experience that in from the brokerage perspective too. When someone reaches out to you, it's like, that's so nice. It's something that makes you want to work with other people. And I think that type of positivity and connectivity is an infectious thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you said you were with that company for about 4 years. What's your next part of your journey? Where did you go
Yeah.
on from there? You're Accor now. How did you get to Accor?
So I had several stops along the way. I was interested, I think, mainly in gaining experience from all different sides of the table. So I worked for a third-party operator, understanding deals from their side, working on a consultative basis. At the time, the company was selling its majority interest in a company. So I helped facilitate actually the majority sale of that company at the time, very shortly after I joined. And then the company that purchased us was in the process of raising a fund for investing in hotels. So under that platform, I served as acquisitions advisor, helping them acquire a $2 billion portfolio from Goldman Sachs. I then went on to work for a real estate developer, actually being the lead development person. So handling ground up hotel development. So raising debt and equity, finding a site, working with partners, interviewing architects, GCs, et cetera, bringing the brand on, negotiating docs from that side, and really seeing the hotels come to fruition. I had mentioned C.A. Anderson earlier in our conversation. He reached out to me because he had just been tapped to oversee the growth of the Cambria brand. And at the time, the brand was actually losing, so a net loss every year for the past couple of years on the growth side. He said, if you're interested in brand development and you're up for a challenge, please come and join the team. And I knew it would be a challenge. Choice was pushing upscale, which was something that they, really no other company had done. If you look at Marriott, Hilton, they kind of all started with the big full service boxes that were deemed upscale at the time, and then launched their Courtyard or launched their Hilton Garden Inn. And Choice was doing the opposite, and this seemed intriguing to me, and I loved working for him. So I joined the team and then spent 9 years, ultimately getting promoted to oversee the team on the growth side for Cambria, which was a tremendous story at the time. And then was interested in revisiting the more luxury and lifestyle complex assets that I touched when I was in feasibility at Hilton. So when the opportunity came to grow the luxury brands at Accor and also get an introduction, a more thorough introduction to branded residential, which keeps us pretty busy these days, that was something that really intrigued me, and I decided to move on.
Very nice. So you worked in a lot of different aspects. I love this. The finance, the development, the legal. Would you say that changes the way that you look at an owner's pro forma?
I think so. I mean, I would say probably with more scrutiny than someone who hasn't been, especially given that my experience spans several cycles, economic cycles. So I have felt the impacts of downturns. So I think being very disciplined in my approach to underwriting and deal making is helpful for everyone long term, no matter where you are. But I would say, because at the end of the day, if it's not a good project for the owner, it's probably not a good project for the brand.
Yes, absolutely. And vice versa. And there's a lot of different brands. And that's one of the things that I love about hospitality too, is you have so many different brands that serve individual customers, travelers, business, whatever, that you can mold the exact experience around. And there's typically a brand for that, or at least a version of it. And if it's not good for the brand, that set of customers, it's probably not good for the owner.
I would agree.
What do you think most owners misunderstand about the brand side?
I think that oftentimes owners assume that brands will come up with a concept or an idea that they instantly want implemented, and it feels very dogmatic and it feels very disconnected from really what's happening. And I like to think of myself as, because I have so much connection to our owners, there's a constant flow of communication between what I hear out there and what I'm actually seeing, and our ops team and what they're seeing, and then also what our brand leaders are seeing. And I think that sometimes that there's a misconception that they're making decisions in a vacuum. And I don't think that that's the case, at least based off of my experience.
Yeah, I agree. It's got to be a partnership. That's one of the things that I feel like I preach a lot, is that when I'm talking to an owner, you have to look at everybody as a potential partner. If you don't, you need to not work with them completely. But that's between the brand, the franchise, the local vendors that you're using, your lender. That's huge. The attorneys, everybody. If they're not a partner, you need to find someone that is a partner, someone that will work with you. And you have to utilize everybody's perspective in order to have real good long-term success. When a deal crosses your desk, what would you say are the first 3 signals that make you lean in?
So the market is generally our first focus, for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, we're well versed in these critical tentpole markets that are on our must-haves list to really solidify the brand's presence. And these are really created with a lot of thought in mind. It's not just this is going to be a brand building location, but it's how much, especially with Accor, how much international demand is coming through our channels that can help really support and create a compelling argument as to why our brand should be here. Then we kind of go through your typical questions that get a little bit more granular. So how has supply and demand fared in recent years? Really testing the strength of the market. What's fueling the local economy? How multidimensional are the demand drivers? And what has opened up recently and how is it performing? So I would say that's really kind of the top-down view of how I would look at a market and what questions run through my mind when I'm evaluating the strength of the market.
All right. Looking on the owner, the investor themselves, what does sponsorship really mean from the brand side? What makes an owner bankable to the brand?
Sure. So the sponsor's ability to capitalize the deal is obviously super important to us. You know, we're not in the business of signing paper, just to sign paper. We really need to see these iconic hotels and branded residential projects come to fruition. Yeah. The right sponsors will really work with us on product fit or brand positioning to find true alignment on the offering. Like as you even mentioned, it's a partnership. And I think that that's an incredibly important aspect that is oftentimes overlooked. But really a good track record of executing on similar projects is also key. You know, they've been through this before. They really know what questions to ask and what to look out for. A strong balance sheet, a given, as well as a solid reputation in the industry.
Their team, right? I mean, you want to make sure that they have somebody there to implement everything as you get started.
Yeah, bench strength is very important.
What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that owners make when they pitch a project? What's the fastest way for them to accidentally lose momentum?
Sure. If they're approaching us so early, so for example, if they don't have site control and the mandate is too broad, they don't really have a vision yet. It just, that in my mind, it really just translates to they are really putting the onus on us to kind of figure it out and come up with a thesis. And we certainly have the capacity to do that. But, we evaluate so many projects that really it is our preference when someone comes to us with, hey, this is our game plan. And we have some flexibility here to really align on the vision and tailor it to the brand and bring your thoughts into the conversation. But they are not expecting us to really start from scratch and do all the legwork behind it.
Yeah. If it's their project, they need to come up with something, right? Not just, right. Hey, I think a good hotel in a good area would be good. Tell me where to go, what to do. Just do everything for me. Just lay it at my feet, please. What's a red flag that has nothing to do with the money that makes a brand nervous?
I think if the experience isn't there, if they haven't completed a project before of this magnitude, I mean, especially on the luxury side, it's a cause for concern. And then you can look to see, okay, well, where did they come from? You know, with the place where they were, you know, have they been able, what side of the business have they historically worked on? What have they done? Really looking at their resume and experience level. Or are they bringing the right people on board? You know, I think that if they have not really thought through, hey, because it's okay, we all, none of us have a complete experience, but then have the humility and the wherewithal to say, I'm partnering with a group. I'm partnering with this group because they sort of fill in the blanks here. I think if we see steps that they're taking to strengthen their team and implement in certain areas, I think that that's certainly a breath of fresh air. If they're not, and they're saying we're not going to part with anything, we're going to do it ourselves, and they've never done that before, then we start to get a little nervous or a little curious about it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Are most of the owners that you're working with, do you have more so like the one-offs? They have one hotel that they're owning, operating, several institutional. What do you see the most for what you are working with?
Mix. And I think the biggest reason for that is that I oversee the development of 6 brands. So kind of at the bottom or entry level luxury level, you're talking about really M Gallery, which is a conversion brand, and that's designed to compete in the entry level luxury space. And you can have a group or family office that owns a couple of hotels that have historic significance. They want to layer on a soft brand. So we work with them, and then we work with some of the largest investors in the world. You know, with Accor being a global company, we have there's a lot of global capital that invests in our projects. And given the size of most of the projects that I work on, or most of the hotels and branded residential deals, it is oftentimes very sophisticated capital groups that we're working with.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a large scale world when you're at that point, I believe. What would you say is the difference between an owner who scales past multiple hotels versus somebody that gets stuck at one hotel or can't move past a second hotel?
It really depends on what their goals are. I've met many ownership groups that are happy to own a handful of hotels, and they're very proud of them, and they have no aspirations to turn into a bigger group that has more. They really take a lot of pride in what they have, and they pay a lot of attention to the hotels they have in their portfolio. So I think it all comes down to what their objectives are as an owner, and their ability to raise capital. I mean, that's a key factor.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the commercial real estate world for a long time, and I'm now in the hospitality for a while. And there's a certain level of investors, people, the mindset that more is always better. You got to have more. You got one hotel, you got to have a second, got to have a third, got to have the 10th. But that doesn't always make sense for the person. You have to really look at what are your skill sets, what are your resources, but also what do you want the hotels, what do you want the companies to actually do for you? And does getting large group, does that actually make sense for you? Like, look at it realistically, not just, hey, bigger is better.
And it means, well, what kind of organization do you want to manage? I mean, how many layers do you want to have? Because inevitably, the more you have, and the higher up you are, the less connected you are to your properties. Do you want to bring on another layer of analysts, of asset managers, of operations people? I mean, the answer may be yes, but it really depends on kind of what you want your day-to-day to look like, and what you want your organization to look like. You know, what do you want to manage?
Yeah. All right, moving over a little bit. I'm curious on your perspective on the new build, the new construction versus a conversion. When does a conversion actually make more sense than new construction?
Sure. So mathematically, it makes sense when you can buy it for less than replacement costs. But from a luxury brand side, like, we really lean into these truly iconic, irreplaceable properties. We have the Plaza in New York City. That's a Fairmont hotel. You know, we have Banff Springs, which is dubbed the castle in the Rockies. You know, it's a phenomenal building. They just don't build them like this anymore. the Royal York in downtown Toronto. So all of those and all of those that I just mentioned are Fairmonts. A truly iconic, irreplaceable real estate. You can call that a conversion, but those are really something that we're really interested in, especially with our three centenarian brands. These are, Orient Express, Raffles, Fairmont, which are all very rich in history. They all have a distinct brand identity. And we're really intrigued with associating these brands with landmark real estate, with the heritage we can certainly leverage to create a truly memorable experience for the guest. With that said, we're quite busy with new development on the luxury side. A lot of our projects, as you can imagine, have a branded residential component. There's the very practical side of that, which in many states in the U.S. you can use the deposits to help with your capital stack. And overall, branded res is really helping our projects pencil from a ground up perspective. So we look at all different types of projects, but we certainly don't shy away from the conversions. But in some cases, new build certainly makes a lot more sense and can allow you to create the programming that's a little bit more operationally efficient, because you're simply working with fewer constraints than if you were working within the confines of a historic hotel.
Yeah, absolutely. And the industry's always evolving, it's always changing. And when you're looking at an existing, especially a historic, you are constrained to what the building is. And if you're looking for something totally different, sometimes you're just going to have to completely redevelop.
And the beauty of new development is you can take a look at a market now and say, hey, how has group business changed over the years? What do we think it's going to be like going forward? How much meeting space does it make sense to program? People want different things with meeting space now than they did, way back when, right? It's just like,
Yes.
and operationally, and how's the kitchen, how's the banquet? There's just so much that goes into it that being able to have the blank slate is certainly nice from a programmatic standpoint, especially when you're running your various models and figuring out what makes the most financial sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any hidden friction points that conversion owners don't usually see until they're deep into it?
For conversion specifically, I would say fire and life safety can be something that comes up as an issue. I think having an updated PCR is helpful, also, especially when you start to engage the brand and you're asking for a PIP. But I think in terms of friction points, oftentimes it's like the devil's in the details, and these come up. They're very, not things you want to talk about early on, and maybe they may not be mentioned in the MOU, but they are things that are going to be mentioned in the agreements. And that's when owners start to be like, oh yeah, I didn't give a whole lot of thought to this necessarily, but let's work through it. I would say another one with the brands can tend to be some of the smaller fees that brands charge on the distribution side or similar, that it's like, oh wait, we need to better understand how this works before we move forward. So they're generally conversations that we have. Are they friction points? Maybe only from the standpoint of, oh, I didn't really see that coming. But there are conversations that we're well versed in handling those questions and talking through it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, going back to the partnership aspect, if you are having the conversations early, or if you are valuing the partnership of the brand, you're going to get so much more experience. You guys have been through, between you and your team, have been through so many different choke points, so many of those different friction points that it's not really friction for you, but it could be if you are not involved.
Yeah, and it could also be friction if I choose to handle it differently. But I try to reiterate alignment in our conversations. I try to take a step back and understand where they're coming from and listen to them. And then also, oftentimes, if it's one of the smaller fees that the brand charges, if it's something that we've already factored into our pro forma, and I can already tell you that the quantum of this issue is minor, how can I convey that to an owner in a tactful way that doesn't minimize their concern over it, but also demonstrates in a very polished way why it might not be that big a deal, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. Yes. Nothing to freak out about. Let's work through it. Let's look at all the options.
Exactly.
Brains talk a lot about feasibility. What would you say are some of the deal killers inside a feasibility review?
The market to support the additional key count, especially with luxury, especially with the key count with the branded res units. So the market being able to support the project is massive. We have the view that it all flows from the top. If we don't really have the luxury guest demand who are willing to pay the rates, willing to dine at our outlets, willing to utilize the spa, then we can't fully support the operation of the hotel on a sustainable basis. We also get a little bit shy if it's a market that's one-sided or too reliant on one or two demand drivers. That can be a cause of concern for us. So especially if these one or two demand drivers can pick up and relocate. It's not the case if it's a beautiful beach and it's a well-established resort. You're really there for that, and you can really create your own village where you're your own demand driver in a sense, or the ocean is, or the mountains are. But if it is a market that's a little bit more one-dimensional on the demand driver side, then we can get a little bit concerned about the overall sustainability of the hotel.
Absolutely. Are there any assumptions that you see owners consistently overestimate?
Yeah, I think year one projections are a commonly, especially with new development, commonly overestimated area. So I would say from both a top line and a profitability standpoint, and I fully appreciate what, you want to see a yield you can stomach out of the gate. I'm sure your lender wants to see a particular debt service coverage ratio. And
Sure.
trust us, we want to see our fees, at a pretty healthy level year one as well. But it really takes time to build up occupancy and establish a new hotel in the market, especially in the luxury space. Even with great brands, with great teams in place, and high compression in established markets will certainly have an easier and shorter time with that ramp up. But yeah, I would say year one is generally an area that is overestimated.
Yes. There's so many different things that happen in year one. Just the training of the staff and making sure you have all the very basic stuff you just have to work through. And then building the recognition, building the repeat people. Like you don't really have a whole lot of repeat business the first year. So it definitely takes some time. What is the timeline reality from the first call to a signed agreement? What can slow it down and what can speed it up? The whole process for you.
Yeah, generally what slows us down, and I would say this is on both sides, can be internal approvals. We're a large, complex organization. We function as a global company, and oftentimes we're working with the same on the sponsorship side. Oftentimes there will be cultural aspects that we need to be patient with and need to work with and need to understand, depending on where this capital is coming from and what their process is like and who they need to get approvals from. And so I think that patience is in navigating these inner workings is certainly a virtue. And I would say coming to agreement on programming and ultimately what does this look like, especially with our new builds, can take time, and it can be a very involved process. But it is a very important part of the process that we all reach a point where we believe that we're setting the hotel up for success in what we've programmed. On the flip side, things that really speed it up, I think that reiterating that we're all working toward a common goal is critical. I think that this mantra, really, you can call it that, relieves pressure, because it's easy to get hyper-focused on your position and what you're focused on, what's right in front of you. And then sometimes someone else's position can come off like a threat to your own. So I think that it's a useful tactic, certainly to reduce friction by asking questions that draw you back to the intention, because then you can find common ground once again and encourage everyone to press on. And this is true for us when we're working with our own departments internally, but also it can be useful when working with our sponsors.
Absolutely. What does a good owner brand relationship look like operationally?
Sure. So you had mentioned before that it's a partnership, and I think that the groups who get the most out of their brand relationships, they do treat the brand like a partner. I think that they use them as a consultant. They keep them apprised as to what their goals are. I like to think of it as kind of like a two-way walking path where information is flowing in both directions. Sometimes you stop and catch up to discuss an issue. Sometimes you just smile and keep walking. But it's really, I think the two-way flow of information is really critical, because unless you're clear about what your goals are and where you want to be and what you want to do with a hotel, then how can your partner really help you, right? So making
Right.
sure that the lines of communication are open is really a critical facet.
Yeah. Anywhere that you see owners go sideways with brands, like how do the best owners handle conflict? Or if you have any examples that doesn't give too much information on a time where it does go sideways and the owner didn't handle conflict well.
Sure. And I think owners can get frustrated when brands take a dogmatic position that can come off as unconcerned and disconnected from the situation that they're handling with their hotel.
Yeah.
I think that if it's a situation that's relatively dire, so in a downturn, if the owner's having a difficult time paying their debt service, then they're going to want the brand to provide some relief. And I think what we saw, at least from my view, with going through COVID and the brands being very receptive and understanding to, like, we can't push a PIP. Like, we knew we had a PIP scheduled, but we're going to have to push this out, and we're going to have to work with our owners, and we're going to have to figure out if there's any sort of modification with anything that we do to really keep us both surviving through this difficult period and coming out hopefully stronger than where we started.
Yeah. Yeah. That was definitely a very difficult position for everybody involved. And with the PIP, you need to do some level of work. You got to keep the brands up, because that hurts everybody inside that brand if some of them start to go south hard. But if there's no money there, there's no guests. How do you pay for the PIP? It's a hard conflict to get through, I'm sure.
Exactly. And I think that it's very smart to not be tone deaf in those types of situations, because you're not going to get anything out of it from the brand standpoint, and it's not so pushing on it is not going to really, it can just hurt the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. If an owner wants optionally to sell versus hold versus refinance, what are some things that they can do with the brand relationship?
Yeah. So, and we have a team who, we run scenarios really alongside our owners. We'll preemptively PIP an asset. We will, and we have an exceptionally strong luxury operations team who also is wonderful at taking best practices to see which outlets can be optimized, what should be reconfigured within the hotel. If this is more of we really need to figure out how to derive more value from this particular asset. If it's a refinance or a sale, I mean, we're in constant contact with our owners, with brokers, lenders. We can make introductions and we can run those scenarios. So I think, this all comes back to really treating us like a partnership in order to get the most out of our relationship with it. If the brand feels blindsided or you're not including in those conversations, then that can certainly lead to friction. And I think that taking the opposite approach, which is just seeing what you can work out with the brand and figure out a best case scenario for both of you, can certainly go a long way.
Yeah. If you had to choose best site with a mediocre sponsor or the best sponsor with a borderline site, which one wins?
Oh, that's a tough one. But I think that the site and the market are really paramount. I also think that those are things you can't change. I'm not suggesting we would take a
Yes.
deal and swap out the sponsor, but what we can
Right.
do, what we can do is bolster the strength of sponsors through potential partnership and introduction to capital,
Yeah.
introduction to brokers who can make those connections. Bringing on maybe a development group, even if they are a fee developer, to move the project forward. If this is so outside the scope of what the owner of the site has. But I think for us, we want to be in the best locations within the markets. I mean, that's a crucial part of the overall hotel that doesn't simply go away. So that's how I would, that's my response to that.
That makes sense. Yes. Can you introduce somebody that they can bring in, whether it's management or somebody, in order to operate it the way that it needs to be, but you keep the good site, the good location, the good market? That makes sense. Looking at the market outlook, where is development appetite actually showing up right now? Product types, geographies, capital sources. What are you seeing?
We see a lot of demand on the luxury side. I mean, from simply the luxury segment's doing well. The branded residential components are doing very well. So that's one area that we're really leaning into. I would say also just being at Accor and having so much strength across the globe in markets where there is international demand. I think there's a real argument there for our soft brands on the luxury side. So I would say kind of all those things combined are really helping fuel what has ultimately been a busy couple years here.
Okay. Anything that you are watching closely for 2026?
I'm really curious in terms of what the capital markets will do. I'm sure everyone is, but I think that let's just see what these long-term interest rates, especially 10-year treasury yields, the 5 or 7-year swap rates, and then the spreads above those, which, as you know, represent the risk that lenders are pricing in. If they all come down in 2026, I'm not convinced at this moment that we have enough economic, geopolitical, or other indicators necessarily to justify compelling risk adjustments in the near term. But I think some were hoping that the sentiments of a slight reduction in the Fed rate might bolster a more aggressive lending appetite. But I think what we're seeing are the results of the residual effects of persistent inflation, fiscal policy, and government debt supply, which can also push up yields independently of the Fed, and more attractive, risk-adjusted alternate investments in other sectors. So I'm really curious to see how the capital markets are going to change throughout the next year, because certainly that has a big impact on our business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like we went through such a long period where you're always looking at and concerned about the capital markets, but a decade of, it works out. Everything works out. So let's focus on other things. But now, the last few years, right, everybody that has been so high on the radar is what's going to happen. What are the rates going to look like? Does this even pencil out? So many deals don't even pencil right now with the rates and or the outlook of where it is. And I feel like there were a lot of predictions that we're going to have these massive debt maturities and that's going to completely screw up the system. And I feel like that was 22 and then 23, that was the year it's going to hit. And 24, that's when everything's going down. Well, 24 didn't hit, but 25, that's where we're going to see a lot of the issues. And I feel like it hasn't really hurt the global market that much anyway. There's definitely some pieces to it, but overall, I feel like the maturity issue that everybody was so concerned about hasn't really had too much of an effect.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really think that it's more of a concern on the origination side and new loans. And if anything, it's creating a little bit of supply constraint in some markets, certainly. And we're benefiting from that compression from an operations standpoint with our current portfolio in cities such as Miami and New York. Of course, Miami, we're seeing more development activity, which will open up and then create the potential for less compression and lower rates. Although demand, it's wild because there's some markets that it's just like, no matter what the increase in supply, we're still seeing demand outpacing it. So
Right.
we'll see what happens over the next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's for sure. All right. Before you can check out, you got to have your wake up call. A few rapid fire questions for you. What's a hotel development trend you believe is real that most people still underestimate?
One development trend that's very real and I think still underestimated today is really the long-term shift toward smaller, more flexible, mixed-use hotel projects that are designed to be operationally resilient and not just market-driven. So I think that we're seeing developers move away from these large single-use, convention-dependent hotels, and instead we're favoring projects that can adapt across demand cycles. So often this means fewer keys, or maybe more mixed use within one building, tighter staffing models, and as I mentioned, different components. So it could include a residential, it could include some office, maybe some experiential retail, which we're seeing more and more of. The flexibility isn't just about design; it's also about underwriting efficiency. And I think that people underestimate how permanent the shift is. I don't think it's a temporary reaction to higher interest rates or construction costs, as we mentioned. I think it's more of a structural response to capital discipline, labor, which is has been a concerning factor of our business for a while now, and also lenders demanding more predictability on the cash flow side.
Absolutely. What's one metric that you look at first that owners rarely mention?
Always interested in ADR gaps between segments. So if we run an upscale set, if we run a luxury set, this helps me better understand how much room there might be to not only push ADR, but really shield you from conflicting or competing with maybe a lower set. I think that this really speaks to the overall health of a market and its price sensitivity, because it's never good to have a luxury product competing with upscale, because of course you're carrying the heavier operating model. So that's something I always look at to really test the depth of a market from an ADR standpoint.
Yeah, I love it. What is the best deal you've worked on? What made it special?
I can't answer this one. There's too many. This is every deal that feels like a win-win and adds a brand building property to our portfolio is special. So I started to think through this and I was like, it's got to be the most recent ones I worked on, but it's too tough to pick.
Yes. I like to say it's a joking question, but I have 6 kids and I get asked, like, well, which one's your favorite? Like, well, obviously I don't have a favorite, but the realistic answer is whichever one's in front of me at the moment. I love just spending time with them. So the one that you're close with and you're interacting with, like, they happen to be my favorite because I'm right there.
Exactly.
What's the most common smart person mistake you see in feasibility assumptions?
Yeah, I would say confusing the notion that the market can support it with this specific hotel can capture it. And one of my favorite things about being a more analytical in how I evaluate deals, how I look at hotels, is really the creativity that first interested me in going in this direction with my career. It's really figuring out, well, how can we differentiate our asset? How can we make this really special? What are the assumptions we're programming into our underwriting? I think that's something that I think is a really cool part of our business that is worth focusing on.
I love it. If you could give every owner one rule for working with brands, what would it be?
Just to keep in mind that our intentions are generally aligned. You might differ on how you want to get somewhere, but at the end of the day, we all want to get there together. You all want a successful hotel.
Absolutely. Partnership. I feel like that's a main theme for this podcast.
Yeah, completely.
Awesome. Sonia, thank you so much for jumping on. I loved your perspective. I loved the conversation. Anything that you wish I asked that I hadn't?
I think so. I think you covered it all. You nailed it.
All right. All right. You still riding horses?
No, not enough time. It's a lifestyle.
No. Agree.
Maybe one day.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for your time.
Yes. Thank you, Sonia.